The Elder Brain. They really put the mind in hive mind when it comes to the illithid colonies. They puppet around their minions to spread their agenda of universal domination. But these things have gotten a bit more popular over the years. They used to be relegated to side books like Volo's Guide to Monsters or Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse. However, after a certain Baldur's Gate 3 came out about 2 years ago, they've gotten a lot more popular because, spoiler alert, they're the final boss. Their stat block is a bit weird because their armor class is kind of weak, they can't really move, and they're a very stationary monster. But you can use that to your advantage because they're never going to go outside of their lair. So I'm going to tell you what kind of minions they're going to have in their lair, what you're going to do before you fight the monster, because if you're fighting an Elder Brain at full capacity, you're doing it wrong. And I will be telling you the tactics of both the Elder Brain and the minions that are going to be with the Elder Brain. But now, without further ado, I'd like to present Monster Half-Life's Guide to the Elder Brain. The Elder Brain stat block is pretty interesting because it has a lot of twists and turns that you wouldn't really expect, and it's statted a bit weirdly for a creature of its CR. Its armor class is a very pitiful 10, but that's to be expected because it's literally just a floating brain. It has 210 HP, and it has a 5-foot ground speed and a 10-foot swim speed. So, truthfully, it's not going to be moving very fast. As for its stats, it's a bit strange also. As for its strongest stat, it's charisma at a 24. You know what they say, the mind is the sexiest part of the body. And its weakest stat is its dexterity at a 10, or a +0. It's proficient in intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws, as well as the arcana, deception, intimidation, and persuasion skills, as well as having expertise in insight. It has a blind sight of 120 feet, so it's going to be able to detect anything that's invisible trying to sneak up on it, and it can understand common, deep speech, and undercommon, and it has telepathy up to 5 miles. Speaking of 5 miles, its first trait is its creature sense, which makes sure that the Elder Brain is aware of any creature that's within 5 miles of it that has an intelligence score of 4 or higher, and knows the distance and direction of each creature as well as how smart they are, but can't really sense anything else about it. If the creature is protected by some sort of magic that can mask them to divination spells, such as the Mind Blink spell or a non-detection spell, they can't be sensed this way. They have 3 legendary resistances a day, they have magic resistance, and then they also have the trait Telepathic Hub, which lets them use their telepathy to initiate and maintain telepathic conversations with up to 10 creatures at a time. The Elder Brain can let those creatures also hear each other while they're connected this way. As for their actions, they're a bit unique in the fact that they don't have a multi-attack. Each one of these can only be used once on the Elder Brain's turn, and you can't use them all at once. They have their Tentacle, which is a +7 to hit. It has a reach of 30 feet, and it does 48 + 2 bludgeoning damage on a hit. If the creature is huge or smaller, it gets automatically grappled with an escape DC of 15, and the creature that is grappled takes 1d8 + 5 psychic damage at the start of each of its turns until its grapple ends. The Elder Brain can have up to 4 creatures grappled at a time. It has the Mind Blast ability, which recharges on a 5 or a 6, and which makes sure that the creatures within 60 feet of the Elder Brain's choice must succeed on a DC 18 intelligence saving throw, or they're going to take 5d10 + 5 psychic damage and be stunned for 1 minute. The target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the stunned effect on a success. Lastly, it has its spellcasting through its psionics. At will, it can cast Detect Thoughts and Levitate. 3 times a day, you can cast Modify Memory. And once a day, you can cast Dominate Monster or Plane Shift on yourself. As for bonus actions, they have 2 of them. Their first one is Psychic Link, which the Elder Brain can target one incapacitated creature it can sense with its creature sense, which basically means any incapacitated creature within 5 miles of the Elder Brain. Until that link ends, the Elder Brain can perceive everything that the target senses, and the target becomes aware that something is linked when it becomes unincapacitated. The Elder Brain can terminate the link at any time, and it doesn't require an action to do this, and the target can use their action on their turn to attempt to break the link, doing so with a successful DC 18 Charisma saving throw. If they do succeed the save, they take 3d6 psychic damage. The link also ends if the target and the Elder Brain are more than 5 miles apart, and the Elder Brain can have up to 10 psychic links at a time. Their second bonus action is their Sense Thoughts, which the Elder Brain can target a creature that it has a psychic link with, and it can basically read its mind. It can gain insight to its emotional state and its foremost thoughts, including worries, loves, and hates. Lastly, it has its legendary actions. It has 4 legendary actions it can choose from, and it can take up to 3 legendary actions a round. 3 out of 4 of them do require a psychic link, though, so you're going to be wanting to try and get as many psychic links as possible. Its first one is Break Concentration, where the Elder Brain targets one creature within 120 feet of it, which has a psychic link, and the Elder Brain breaks the creature's connection on the spell that it's concentrating on. The creature also takes 1d4 psychic damage per level of that spell. Their second attack is their Psychic Pulse, which the Elder Brain targets one creature within 120 feet of it that has a psychic link, and the target and the enemies of the Elder Brain within 30 feet of the target takes 3d6 psychic damage. Their last legendary action that has something to do with the psychic link is their Sever Psychic Link legendary action. The Elder Brain targets one creature within 120 feet of it that it has a psychic link with, and the Elder Brain ends that link, causing that creature to have disadvantage on all ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws until that creature's next turn. Lastly, it has its Tentacle legendary action, which costs 2 legendary actions, where the Elder Brain makes 1 tentacle attack. But that's not all the legendary actions that the Elder Brain can do, as it also has its lair actions, because you're not going to be fighting the Elder Brain outside of its lair. On initiative count 20, losing initiative ties, the Elder Brain can take 1 lair action, and it can't take the same one twice in a row. Its first one is Force Wall, which lets the Elder Brain cast Wall of Force. Its second one is Psionic Anchor, where the Elder Brain targets one creature it can see within 120 feet of it and anchors it by sheer force of will. The target must make a DC 18 Charisma saving throw, and on a failed save, its speed is reduced to 0 HP and it cannot teleport. It is able to repeat the save at the end of each of its turns, ending its effect on a success. And lastly, it has Psionic Inspiration, where the Elder Brain targets one friendly creature it can sense within 120 feet of it, and that creature has a flash of inspiration, and it gains advantage on one attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes before the end of its next turn. It also has some regional effects, but the only one that has any mechanical effects is Telepathic Eavesdropping. The Elder Brain can hear any telepathic conversation within 5 miles of it. The creature that initiates the telepathic conversation must make a DC 18 Wisdom saving throw when the telepathic contact is first established. If the save is successful, the creature is aware that something is eavesdropping. The nature of the eavesdropper is not revealed. So basically, if the party uses telepathy, the Elder Brain can basically metagame. Because if they're planning with telepathy, then the Elder Brain's going to read whatever they're saying, and then, it's going to know your strategy. The minions of the Elder Brain are going to fall into three categories. You're going to have the fodder, you're going to have the soldiers, and then you're going to have the generals. The fodder is going to be the Grimlocks and the Intellect Devourers. The Grimlocks are just basically the slaves. You can also pair them up with like bugbears or goblins or really anything that you think that an Illithid colony would take as prisoner. But the Grimlocks, if you don't want to put anything else, they are the slave force of the Illithid army. The Intellect Devourer is not much stronger, and you're probably not going to be wanting to use their claw attacks too much. What they're probably going to be using is their Devour Intellect, which is going to stun the opponent until the end of the Intellect Devourer's next turn, if they fail the Intelligence saving throw. Now, unlike if you fight them in earlier levels, you're probably not going to have your body stolen if you're going into an Illithid lair, right? You don't have to worry about getting your body stolen, especially with the nerf where you have to have 10 HP or fewer. They're not going to be that much of a problem. But stunned is still good, and this is especially good for any of the minions, but you're going to want to try and stun your opponents so that the Elder Brain can use its creature sense to sense them, and then use its psychic link to try and link with the opponents, because they only really have to be within 5 miles of the Elder Brain. So they're going to want to try and link with as much of the party as they can before the party goes to fight them, so they can use their legendary action on as many people as possible. Of course, they have the regular Mind Flayers, which can also stun people with their Mind Blast, and they can also use Dominate Monster to try and turn your opponents against each other. So basically, you're trying to turn the party's barbarian into a killing machine for you. They have Extract Brain if the target's grappled by the Mind Flayer's tentacles, and of course the tentacles automatically grapple if they hit someone. If they're grappled, they're also stunned. So that's also something to kind of keep in mind for this. The Mind Flayers come with 2 varieties in the new monster manual, but I'm going to tell you not to use the second one, the Mind Flayer Arcanist. Not because they're bad. In fact, they are very good. They are almost too good, but that's not why I'm telling you not to use them. I'm telling you not to use them because in older editions and even older renditions of 5th edition, if a Mind Flayer used wizardly magics, like the Weave, they were shunned from the colony. They didn't usually use magic, because magic was looked down upon. It was like a lesser form of attacking, basically. So I wouldn't have the Mind Flayer Arcanist inside the Elder Brain's lair, mostly because it doesn't really make sense for them to be there. What does make sense for them to be there, though, is the Ulitharid, which are basically stronger Mind Flayers. Now, these aren't in the monster manual. These are stuck, again, in Volo's Guide to Monsters and Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, and they're not even really grouped up with the Elder Brains. You kind of have to try and find them. But you want to have at least 1 or 2 of these. You don't want to have too many, because they are exceptional Mind Flayers, usually raised to either be the second in command as the general of the Elder Brain, or a rival to the Elder Brain, something that can turn into an Elder Brain later on. They also have their Mind Blast. They can also extract a brain, and they have their tentacles, and they have their creature sense and stuff like that. But the psionics are where you really want to look. They have scrying, which means that they can basically spy on the party once a day while they're either in their lair or approaching the lair, so you can get more information on them. See what the colony would know about these intruders. They have mass suggestion, which can basically take out a couple of weaker-willed party members if you really want to. You can either make them into slaves of the colony for a little bit, or you can just send them away. It's really up to you. Dominate Monster, again, is always good. They have Plane Shift, which means they can get out of there if they really want to. Project Image is pretty good too. They can basically try and trick the party into thinking they're somewhere else. But I will say there's 2 things I would really change about the Ulitharid. One, to become more in line with the Mind Flayers, I would give them immunity to psychic damage. The regular Mind Flayers have resistance to it, so it would make sense that the upgrade would have immunity. The second thing I would change is that one of their once-a-day spells is Feeble Mind. Now, you may be asking, why are you changing Feeble Mind? It's a really good spell. It can take out an opponent for the rest of the combat and the rest of the month, but I don't know why you'd want to get rid of it. Well, I say get rid of it because it's not in the 2024 Monster Manual. If you want to keep up with the 2024 Monster Manual and the Player's Handbook and stuff, you're going to want to change Feeble Mind into Befuddlement. Befuddlement does a bit more damage, but it doesn't suck for the PCs quite as much. It only takes away their spell casting, and they can't take the magic action. But again, it still lasts 30 days, and it's still an intelligence saving throw, which they have to beat a DC 17 for the Ulatharid. So it just depends on what you want to use, right? It's a 2014 monster, but if you want to bring it up to 2024, you're going to want to change the stuff to be 2024. Before we get to the actual tactics portion of the Elder Brain and their minions, I would personally do one homebrew change to the Elder Brain, and that is I would make it immune to psychic damage. The new Mind Flayer and the new Mind Flayer Arcanist both got an update to where they are either resistant or immune to psychic damage, and I don't think it would make sense if the regular Mind Flayer is resistant to psychic damage, but the Elder Brain and the Ulatharid are not, because, well, they're their superiors. Of course they're going to be more resistant to psychic damage than a regular Mind Flayer is. So that would be my homebrew change. I'd make the Ulatharid and the Elder Brain both immune to psychic damage. Now, before the Elder Brain fights the party, they're probably going to have to fight the minions of the Elder Brain, because they're going down the layer. They're not going to fight the Elder Brain at full strength, or at least they shouldn't, because, well, that would be kind of bad if they did. The monsters that they're going to be fighting on the way down are going to be the Grimlocks, as just silly little time wasters. You don't want to spend too much time on them. The Intellect Devourers, to try and stun the opponents so the Elder Brain can get a psychic link off, or the regular Mind Flayers. You're probably going to want to have about 2 or 3 in each minion squad that the opponents fight, or the party fights. And when the party's fighting down there, I would have 2 or 3 encounters. Gauge how the party's feeling after each encounter before getting them into another one, because a lot of these creatures can stun, and stun is kind of annoying. If your party's tired of getting stunned, fast track them down to the Elder Brain. If not, have them take a little more damage, but don't make sure they're not like super weak when they get down to the Elder Brain. Make sure they're about maybe 2/3 of the way, 2/3 health, right? And they have some of their resources. It depends on how they're saving it or not. Because if your party's like spending all their resources on one encounter, then it's kind of their fault if they don't have anything when they fight the Elder Brain. Now, the Elder Brain has no bonus to initiative whatsoever, so they're probably going to be going last when it comes to monsters, or at least very close to last. The Ulatharid are probably going to come before them because they have a +1 to their initiative. But if you want to homebrew it a little more, I would probably give them proficiency in their initiative, which would boost it up to a +5 to be more in line with the Mind Flayer. Now, for when you come across the Elder Brain, you're going to want to have 1 Elder Brain, obviously, 1 Ulatharid, because you don't want to have too many of them, because they're supposed to be like top-of-the-line Mind Flayers. They're very rare. And I would have about 3 or 4 Mind Flayers. You want to have these tough minions to go along with the Elder Brain. What you're going to do is, it depends on who goes first. If the regular Mind Flayers go first, they're probably going to start off with their Mind Blasts to try and stun as many people as possible and do their psychic damage. Grapple people to eat their brains, things of that nature. If the Ulatharid goes first, they're going to start off with Befuddlement, or Feeble Mind if you're keeping that. they're going to want to use it on the spellcaster that has the weakest intelligence and is also more likely to do something like Wall of Fire. Now, the Elder Brain would share this information with the Ulatharid because their creature sense can sense someone's intelligence score, so they would know who to target, relatively so, unless they made protections against it. But normally, they would probably know who to target. I do suggest, if you are going to start off with befuddlement and the person fails it, that you have an NPC that they can play, because you're basically taking their character out of the fight, and that's not really that fun for the player, right? It's what the monsters would do, especially trying to make sure that they can survive, because they want to survive, but you want to make sure that the player who got befuddled still has some stuff to do besides using a non-magic dagger. So that's my advice. For to help the party a little bit, maybe have an NPC that player could play while their PC is out of the picture. Anyways, for the Elder Brain, they're going to want to use their first layer action, which is probably going to go before their regular action, to cast Wall of Force. Now, there's two things that you can do with Wall of Force. You can either use it to section off a subsection of the party to make sure that they can't really get out or do anything, or you can use the Wall of Force to surround yourself. After all, Wall of Force does a 10-foot by 10-foot globe, and the Elder Brain is large, which is 10-foot by 10-foot. Now, it makes a shell that's practically invulnerable to damage, but that also means they can only use their Mind Blast, because their tentacles can't reach through the wall. That means they can't attack with that. So you're going to want to assume that they're either going to use their Mind Blast and Psychic Link and do that, or they're going to have to drop it when they want to use their tentacles. But it keeps them alive for longer, especially because they're not moving anyways. They have a 5-foot ground speed and a 10-foot swim speed, so you don't really want them moving that much. As for what you want them to do on their turn, well, like I said, they're going to want to start off with Mind Blast. Try and stun as many people as possible, use their bonus action to psychically link with one person, and when they can do that, I would focus on a spellcaster to link with first if a spellcaster gets stunned, mostly because Break Concentration and Psychic Pulse are both good against spellcasters like that, especially if you want to make sure that they're not messing with you or anything like that. For what you want to do afterwards, it's going to depend on who you've linked. If you haven't psychically linked anyone, you can't really use any of your legendary actions, unless you're not Wall of Forcing yourself, and then you can use one tentacle. But generally, you want to try and break concentration with Psychic Link, or just use the Psychic Pulse to do a little bit of AoE damage to everybody. As for what you want to use your legendary resistances on, you want to make sure that you don't get stunned at all, because you're not immune to getting stunned. So you want to make sure that you don't get stunned. Now, if you didn't take the homebrew option of making them immune to psychic damage, then the Mind Flayer and the Ulatharid can probably still accidentally stun the Elder Brain if they get hit with their Psychic Blast. So use the legendary resistance to make sure you can't get stunned. I would also possibly use it on big damage spells like Fireball, just to make sure that you don't get hit with big damage. The Elder Brain doesn't particularly want to leave their home, but if they get below 1/4 HP, you're going to want to use Plane Shift on themselves. Same with the Ulatharid. The Mind Flayers might do it if they see the Elder Brain retreating. They're probably not going to fight to the death, but if the Elder Brain doesn't retreat, the Mind Flayers don't retreat. The minions will only retreat with the Elder Brain. Now, something that you're going to want to use before combat, but not during, you're going to want to use Sense Thoughts to try and get some reading on the party. They can try and target the party with certain emotional states. The Elder Brain can't, but the Ulatharid can. And since the Elder Brain is connected to the Ulatharid via their creature sense and their psionic hub, they're basic. Anything that the Elder Brain knows, the Ulatharid knows, and anything the Ulatharid knows, the Elder Brain knows. So you treat those two as basically having the same pool of knowledge. And so the Ulatharid can cast Project Image to basically bring up the party's worst fears, maybe before combat. Make it a character moment to try and break out of this spell. One thing I forgot to mention in the tactics portion is that they're going to want to use their Psionic Anchor after they use their Force Wall, because it is amazing. It has no time limit on how long it lasts. It's just, on a failed save, their speed is reduced to 0 and they can't teleport. And they repeat the save at the end of each of their turns. So theoretically, you could keep someone in place for a very long time if they have a bad charisma. And their Psychic Inspiration, they might use it. They have to use it eventually, because they can't use the same layer action twice in a row, and you're probably not going to want to keep casting Wall of Force. But Psionic Inspiration is pretty good, especially if the Ulatharid or the Mind Flayer is trying to use their Extract Brain. You can give them advantage on that. That's about it. They're pretty tough, and you're going to be stunned a lot. So the party is definitely going to want to look into how to negate being stunned, maybe negate psychic damage, try to hide their mind so that they can't be psychically linked. You're going to want to give them the option to do that so they don't get absolutely swamped by the Elder Brain when they're fighting them. In conclusion, the Elder Brain can be a very formidable foe, but it has to be with minions. By itself, it isn't super tough. It has one action that it can use, and it has very, very bad defenses for its level and terrible speed. So the strength of this thing is being able to combo with its minions. Now, that's not to say that I went over everything that an Elder Brain can do, because I did skip the Elder Brain Dragon stat block from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, because, frankly, that's a whole different beast. It can do so much more in that form. It's not even funny. It's an entire tier bracket above the Elder Brain. Maybe I'll do a video on it sometime, but I didn't want to have that factor into a regular Elder Brain fight. I do find its stat block a bit strange, though. Its charisma is its strongest stat, but nothing really uses it, right? Like, the only things that use its charisma are its saving throws and its 3 of its skills. Its spellcasting doesn't use charisma, it uses intelligence. Its Mind Blast uses intelligence. Its Psychic Link uses intelligence. And none of its legendary actions use charisma. They all use intelligence. Their layer actions also use intelligence. And their regional effect, telepathic eavesdropping, also uses intelligence. And truthfully, 2 of the 3 charisma skills that the Elder Brain has are never going to be used. Because the only one I think you can use against the players is deception, because you want to make sure that they don't know that you're lying. But you can't really intimidate a player into doing something that they don't want to do, and you can't really persuade a player into doing something they don't want to do. That's more of an NPC type of skill. So I don't really understand why they even include those in the first place, unless you're using it against an NPC. Ignoring those, however, its intelligence is still pretty good, and its constitution is also still pretty good. So it's still a tough monster, but you definitely have to have minions. If they don't have minions, they're not going to be a tough monster, and your players are going to be disappointed. But let me know how you end up using it, and let me know if you used any of the tips in this video. My name's Monster Half-Life, and I'd like you to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm signing out.